You probably have a glass of water sitting on your nightstand right now. Or maybe there's a plastic bottle in the cup holder of your car, or a pressurized metal flask tucked into the side pocket of your backpack. You don't think about it. You reach for it in the middle of the night without even opening your eyes, taking a sip and falling back asleep in seconds. It is a quiet, mundane, almost invisible part of being a modern human. But that simple act of reaching for water that isn't currently inside a river or a lake is actually the single most important technological achievement in the history of our species. We like to talk about the discovery of fire, the invention of the wheel, or the split of the atom as the big milestones. But none of those things matter if you can't walk more than a few hours away from a stream without dying of thirst. Before we were builders, before we were farmers, and before we were even truly us, we had to solve the problem of the leaky bucket. You are a walking, talking paradox. We are a species designed for the heat, yet we are more vulnerable to it than almost any other large mammal on the planet. Think about the last time you went for a run or spent a day working in the yard. Within minutes, you were drenched. That's your superpower. Humans have between 2 and 4 million eccrine sweat glands scattered across our skin. According to research by biological anthropologist Nina Jablonski, this is what allowed our ancestors to move out of the shade and into the open savanna. While other predators had to pant to cool down, which means they had to stop running to catch their breath, we could just keep going. We became the ultimate endurance hunters because we had a built-in radiator system. We could literally run a kudu or a zebra to death because they would overheat while we just kept sweating. But here is the catch. That radiator uses an incredible amount of coolant. In a hot environment, an active human can lose upwards of 1.5 liters of water every single hour. And unlike a camel, which can store massive amounts of water in its bloodstream and specialized tissues, or a desert tortoise that can go a year on a single drink, we have almost zero internal storage capacity. We are essentially a high-performance engine with a tiny, leaky fuel tank. If we don't replenish that water, our blood thickens, our heart rate spikes, and our internal organs begin to cook. This created what scientists call the biological leash. For millions of years, our ancestors were tethered to the water. The geography of early human fossils tells a very specific story. If you look at sites like Oldaway Gorge or the Turkana Basin, the remains of early hominids like Homo erectus are almost always found within a short walk of ancient lake beds or river systems. We couldn't leave. We were trapped by our own biology. If you can only walk for 4 or 5 hours before you need a drink, your world is very small. You are a prisoner of the landscape. To break that leash, we didn't need to evolve new organs. We needed to invent them. We needed to find a way to carry the river with us. The first breakthrough was probably something you'd find in your own kitchen today, though it looked a bit more macabre. When you finish a meal, you throw away the packaging. But for an early hunter, the packaging was the most valuable part. After a successful hunt, the stomach and bladder of a large animal like a deer or an antelope weren't just offal, they were ready-made canteens. A stomach is naturally waterproof, flexible, and surprisingly durable once it's cleaned and treated. By simply tying off one end with a piece of sinew and leaving the other open as a neck, our ancestors created the first portable water storage system. It was lightweight and could be slung over the shoulder. This was the water skin, and it changed everything. We don't have a specific date for when the first water skin was made. Leather and soft tissue don't survive for hundreds of thousands of years in the dirt. They rot. But we know they existed because they show up in the ethnographic record of nearly every hunter-gatherer society ever studied. From the Bedouin in the Sahara using the jerba, a goatskin bag, to the indigenous peoples of the American plains using buffalo bladders, the solution was universal. It's what engineers call convergent invention. When a problem is that fundamental, humans will always find the same answer. The animal skin was a massive upgrade, but it had a flaw. It tasted like an old shoe, and it eventually rotted. To really scale up, we had to look at the garden. There is a specific plant called Lagenaria ciceraria, better known to us as the bottle gourd. It is one of the most mysterious plants in the world. It's a vine that produces a fruit that looks like a bowling pin. If you let it dry out, the flesh disappears, leaving behind a hard, woody, waterproof shell. It is a natural bottle. For a long time, botanists were confused about how this plant ended up all over the world. It's native to Africa, yet it shows up in archaeological sites in Peru and Florida dating back over 10,000 years. A landmark 2014 study led by Drive Logan Kistler used DNA sequencing to solve the mystery. They found that the gourds didn't just float across the ocean on currents, although they can do that. Instead, they were likely carried by humans as they migrated. The bottle gourd may be the first plant humans ever domesticated, not for food because it tastes terrible, but specifically for its utility as a water container. We were farmers of hardware before we were farmers of food. Think about that. 10,000 years ago, people were carefully selecting seeds and tending to vines just so they could have a better way to carry a liter of water across a dry valley. It shows a level of long-term planning and engineering that we usually don't attribute to people from that era. Plants gave us the bottles, but in the driest parts of the world, humans found an even more sophisticated, hard drive for water. Imagine walking across the Kalahari Desert. It is a landscape of red sand and scrub brush where surface water can be non-existent for months at a time. If you're a member of the sand people, your life depends on a very specific bird, the ostrich. An ostrich egg is a marvel of natural engineering. It's the largest cell on Earth, and its shell is incredibly thick and rich in calcium carbonate. It can hold about 1 liter of liquid, roughly the same as 24 chicken eggs. At the Deep Kloof Rock Shelter in South Africa, a team of researchers led by Pierre-Jean Texier discovered something that rewrote our understanding of human intelligence. They found fragments of ostrich eggshells that were 60,000 years old. These weren't just random scraps. They were engraved with geometric patterns, hatched lines, and crossover grids. This is some of the earliest evidence of graphic communication in human history. But why engrave a water bottle? The sand didn't just carry these eggs, they buried them. They created vast, hidden networks of water caches beneath the sand. By engraving the shells with specific symbols, they were essentially labeling their property and marking their GPS coordinates. This allowed them to travel across hundreds of miles of waterless desert, knowing exactly where their next drink was hidden. This isn't just finding water. This is logistics. This is the Bronze Age version of a desert supply chain, executed 50,000 years before the first city was ever built. They weren't just surviving the environment, they were hacking it. But even ostrich eggs have their limits. They're fragile. If you're living in a forest or a mountain range, you need something tougher. In the Great Basin of North America, the Paiute and Shoshone peoples developed what might be the most elegant water technology of all, the pitch-coated basket. If you weave a basket tight enough, it can hold large items, but water will always find the gaps. To fix this, they turned to the pine tree. They would harvest the sticky resin, or pitch, from pine trees and heat it up until it was a liquid. Then, they would toss hot stones and chunks of resin into a tightly woven basket and roll it around. The heat from the stones melted the resin, forcing it into every tiny crevice of the weave. When it cooled, the basket wasn't just a basket anymore. It was a composite material, a prehistoric version of fiberglass. It was lightweight, it was shatterproof, and it was perfectly waterproof. Some of these baskets even had narrow necks to prevent evaporation and were covered in leather to keep the water cool. We know how effective this was because we've found similar technology on the most famous cold case in history, Otzi the Iceman. When Otzi was found frozen in the Alps, he was carrying 2 cylindrical containers made of birch bark. They weren't for water, specifically, one held embers for starting fires, but they used the same principle of folded, waterproof bark stitched together. It shows that 5,300 years ago, humans had a sophisticated understanding of which materials in their environment could resist moisture. We were constantly scanning the world, looking for anything that could hold a shape and stop a leak. Every one of these inventions, the bladder, the gourd, the egg, the basket, shared a common goal: portability. They were about the individual. But about 10,000 years ago, everything changed. When humans transitioned from wandering to staying in one place, our relationship with water transformed from a transport problem into a storage problem. This is where pottery enters the frame. The invention of fired ceramics was the cloud computing of the ancient world. Suddenly, you didn't have to carry your water. You could store it in massive, multi-gallon jars called pit-hoy or amphorae. This changed the scale of human society. If you can store 500 gallons of water in a cellar, you can survive a drought. You can build a house in a place that doesn't have a spring. You can start a city. In ancient Mesopotamia, the development of large-scale ceramic storage allowed for the first true urban centers to emerge in the desert. The Romans took this even further. While we remember them for their massive stone aqueducts, those aqueducts were just the high-speed internet cables. The end-user devices were still the clay pots. An ancient Roman could walk into a shop and buy a standardized ceramic vessel of water or wine. These containers were so common that at Monte Testaccio in Rome, there is a hill made entirely of approximately 53 million broken amphorae. It is a literal mountain of ancient trash, all created because humans needed to move liquids from point A to point B. We had moved from struggling to find a single drink to creating so much water storage that we were literally burying the landscape in our discarded bottles. But there is a dark side to this progress that we often overlook. As our technology for carrying water got better, our biological resilience got worse. Think about a desert nomad from 5,000 years ago. They knew the location of every hidden seep, every moisture-rich root, and every ostrich egg cache within a 3-day walk. They had a mental map of the landscape that was calibrated to the milliliter. They were intimately aware of their body's signals. They knew exactly how much sweat they could afford to lose. Compare that to us. We have become so good at carrying water that we've forgotten how to live without it. We have built an entire civilization on the assumption that water is always a few feet away. We have moved into deserts like Las Vegas and Phoenix, places that would have killed an ancient human in 48 hours, simply because we've mastered the art of moving water through pipes and plastic. We have outsourced our survival to a global infrastructure of pumping stations and bottling plants. This brings us back to that glass of water on your nightstand. It feels like a right. It feels like a permanent fixture of reality. But the history of human migration is really just a history of us trying to find cleverer ways to keep our blood from thickening. Every city on Earth, every road you drive on, and every accomplishment of our species is held together by the thin, fragile thread of our ability to move a clear liquid from a hole in the ground to your mouth. We haven't actually beaten the biological leash. We've just made the leash much, much longer and much more invisible. Our ancestors looked at a dried gourd or an ostrich egg and saw a miracle, a tool that granted them the freedom to explore the unknown. We look at a plastic bottle and see a piece of trash. But the physics haven't changed. If you were to take that bottle away, if you were to cut the pipes and dry up the taps, you would find yourself back in the same position as a Homo erectus on the savannah within a single afternoon. You would feel that familiar, primal tightening in your throat. You would realize that your million-dollar home and your high-tech car are useless if you can't find a way to carry a few liters of fluid across the next 10 miles. The truth is, we are still that same leaky, high-performance engine we were 2 million years ago. We are a tropical species that has tricked the world into letting us live in the cold and the dry. But that trick only works as long as the containers hold. You are never more than 3 days away from total system failure, and the only thing standing between you and the end of your story is the unglamorous, overlooked technology of the vessel. We didn't conquer the earth. We just learned how to carry the river with us in our pockets. And if you think that sounds like an exaggeration, try going 24 hours without touching a single container of liquid. You won't make it to 48 before your brain begins to shrink inside your skull, pulling away from the bone as it dehydrates. You are a biological prisoner, and the only reason you don't feel the bars is because they are made of glass, plastic, and clay. We are only as powerful as our ability to hold a drink. You aren't a master of nature. You're just a very thirsty ape with a very good bottle. And without that bottle, the desert is always waiting to take back everything you've built. We live in a world where we can simulate entire universes on a silicon chip, yet we still can't change the fact that our kidneys will shut down if we don't pour a liter of water into our faces every few hours. It's a humbling realization. All of human history, the wars, the art, the space stations, is just a side effect of a species trying to stay hydrated while it walks. So, next time you take a sip from that bottle, look at it. Really look at it. It's not just a convenience. It's your external organ. It's the piece of hardware that allows you to exist in a world that wasn't designed for you. It's the legacy of the ostrich egg, the pine resin basket, and the animal bladder. It is the most successful piece of technology we have ever created. But don't get too comfortable. That infrastructure you rely on is a recent invention, a tiny blip in the 200,000-year history of our species. For 99% of our time on this planet, we didn't have taps. We had to fight for every drop, and we had to carry it ourselves. We are currently living in a historical anomaly, a brief window where water is easy. If that window ever closes, you'll find out very quickly that you haven't evolved at all. You'll be right back there on the savannah, looking for a gourd, desperate for a way to hold onto the one thing you can't live without. Your survival isn't a guarantee. It's a logistics problem that you're currently winning, but the game never actually ends. The water on your nightstand isn't just a drink. It's the only thing keeping the leash from snapping. And in the grand scheme of time, 3 days is a very, very short leash. If you found this look into our hidden history fascinating, there are thousands of other invisible threads that hold our world together. We're constantly pulling on them to see what unravels. If you want to join us for the next one, hit the subscribe button. It's the best way to make sure you're here when we dive into the next rabbit hole. We'd also love to hear from you in the comments. If you were dropped into the wilderness today, which of these ancient water-carrying methods do you think you could actually pull off? The gourd, the egg, or the animal skin? Let us know. Here is the cold, hard reality that most of us spend our entire lives trying to ignore. Your body is a vessel that cannot hold its own contents. Every single day, you are dying of evaporation, and your entire existence is nothing more than a desperate, ongoing effort to delay that process by moving liquid from one container to another. You are not a permanent resident of this planet. You are a temporary arrangement of seawater that has learned how to walk, and the moment you lose the ability to carry your supply with you, the environment will reclaim its moisture from your cells without a second thought. You are only alive because of a plastic bottle you don't even respect. Without it, you are just 3 days away from turning back into dust.